era in Idaho, when even one-room schoolhouses were rare. The Intermountain Institute at Weiser, Idaho provided an exemplary secondary education for remote pioneer teenagers. From 1900 to 1933, its outstanding reputation attracted students not only from Idaho, but from across the nation and Canada too. This is the story of one of the Pacific Northwest's most successful educational experiments. In 1892, Reverend Edward Anson Paddock arrived in Weiser, Idaho. He was coming from the rough mining town of Leadville, Colorado, where he was known as a sky pilot for using his Christian faith and unflagging physical energy to accomplish great tasks. As a young man, Paddock had spent 6 years sawing and splitting wood to earn his education at Oberlin College and New York Theological Seminary. Aspiring to become a lawyer to avenge the takeover of his family's sawmill, his life took a different turn after hearing an eloquent preacher's plea for Christian leaders to help develop the growing West. A tall, lean man with great moral integrity, Paddock became known as the Abraham Lincoln of the sagebrush. He served in the missionary field for 23 years and built 8 congregational churches. As Paddock traveled the Idaho hills holding gospel and song meetings, he found young people growing up without an education because they couldn't afford to move to areas with public schools. By the time the Weiser Congregational Church was finished in 1894, he had plans underway for a high school called the Weiser Academy. This resulted in a set of buildings on Academy Hill, present site of the Weiser Golf Course. Paddock's affiliation with the new school was short-lived, however. The Academy trustees insisted on a purely academic curriculum and prompt payment for school. Paddock wanted vocational training as part of the curriculum, and remembering his own experience, he also wanted students to be able to earn their way if they couldn't afford to outright pay for their education. He left the academy and started planning for another school. He shared his dream with Jane Slocum and Thomas Marriott, both already teaching at the academy. Jane Marie Slocum was born to a wealthy Quaker family in upstate New York. Most of her life had been spent attending or teaching school. Her credentials were impressive. She taught newly freed slaves after the Civil War. She taught political economy and civil government for 10 years at Howland Collegiate School. She had a law degree from the University of Michigan. Her friendships and relationships with influential people, including her close friends, suffragettes Susan B. Anthony and Emily Howland, would bring funds and outstanding faculty members to the new school. Paddock wanted her on board to oversee the girls at this co-ed boarding school. Thomas P. Marriott, son of a Pennsylvanian Baptist minister, came to Idaho to homestead. He was a public lecturer and talented teacher from Granger Place School in Canandaigua, New York, a girls' school Miss Slocum had helped to found. Having earned a civil engineering degree from Dartmouth College, he designed the new school's campus and aided with the construction of the early buildings. He was the school's principal for boys and taught mathematics and history. Paddock and Marriott donated 80 acres of their homestead claims to the proposed school, and Miss Slocum purchased an adjacent 80 acres and deeded it as her share to the enterprise. With this land base, the school was incorporated on October 20th, 1899. It had a board of 9 trustees and was named the Idaho Industrial Institute. Paddock later wrote,
"I went to work at once for the Institute and sent word into the mountains. If you young people wish to study earnestly enough to come to Weiser, pull off your coats and grub sagebrush for 5 hours a day for the privilege of studying the rest of the time. Come on and we will help you out."
arrived in the fall of 1900, the three founders, all in their late 50s, had launched their new careers. The first building, an 18 by 24-foot shack grandly named the Palace, was up in no time. This was quickly followed by a 2.5-story girls' dorm. This building also housed the dining room, chapel, parlor, and Miss Slocum's office. Each room was warmed by a small stove and lit by a kerosene lamp. In 1903, the construction continued with a boys' dorm that doubled as the principal's office, library, bookstore, and classroom building. The Eagle's Nest came next, so named by the students because the teachers who watched over them with eagle eyes lived there. Fired with the founders' enthusiasm, other idealists left comfortable positions at Eastern schools and colleges to help establish the new frontier school. Top-notch teachers came from Yale, Oberlin, Mount Holyoke, and Bryn Mawr to work for room and board. Most only stayed a couple of years, then returned east to their well-paying positions. Poet Vachel Lindsay spent a year at the Institute. James Stephens, author of The Tales of Paul Bunyan, attended the Institute from 1905 to 1906.
I came out of the hills raw and unruly as a Kairos coal. Here I first learned of a religion of love and charity. Here I had my first real taste of fine culture. At last I experienced great literature. True schooling is more than learning. True teaching is a spiritual experience for the student. Time dissipates learning, but experiences of a young man's soul are everlasting.
So great was the public response to a school that offered an education and a trade for every boy and girl willing to work for them, that the campus could not be built fast enough. Applications far exceeded vacancies, even though all students worked 5 hours a day, rubbing sage, milking cows, cooking, and gardening. Added to this, they had to build their own fires and carry their own water to their upstairs rooms. All the work during the first 10 years and most of it thereafter was done by the students. And school policy guaranteed that nationality, color, advancement in study, or religion were not considered in accepting application. Nor was age a barrier. The oldest student was a 39-year-old stagecoach driver. Paddock noticed that he was chewing tobacco when he asked for admission. When he was told no alcohol or tobacco was allowed at the school, he vowed to quit so he could get an education. Since he had never been to school, he needed extra help and was turned over to 2 volunteer tutors, a mother-daughter team from New York. After several years of study and 5 hours a day tending the farm horses, he left the Institute to start his own business. Far ahead of its time in the humanities, the Institute offered its frontier students art, music, debate, and literature courses, as well as the industrial arts, including agriculture, stock judging, carpentry, blacksmithing, and auto repair. A terrible blow was dealt the young school in 1903. Marriott contracted typhoid fever while on a camping trip and died shortly thereafter. One student wrote home about it.
Dear Mama and all, I suppose you have Lena's letter telling of Mr. Marriott's death. He will be buried today at 3 o'clock. The II boys are going to march and have a kind of drill, and the whole school is going to sing. Oh, Mama, you can't think how sad it is. I'm afraid the III will never be what it was. No one can know how much we all will miss him.
The Institute plugged on, and funds continued to come from benefactors in the East. In 1905, Slocum's former students from back east raised $5,000 as a birthday gift to pay for the construction of her new home in Idaho. Miss Slocum's brother, an architect, drew up the plans for her new house. He brought along his good friend, Frank Lloyd Wright. When construction was completed, Slocum's dear friend Mary Post and her widowed sister-in-law, Helena Post, came out and shared the cottage with her. The frame bungalow was appropriately named Friends Lodge and was the gathering place for many festivities over the years, including teas where students learned proper social etiquette. May Day, next to graduation, was the most celebrated day of the year because it coincided with Slocum's birthday. Maypoles and picnics were the order of the day, and wreaths of wildflowers crowned Miss Slocum Queen of May Day. The school grew and prospered, and at various times operated a bakery, a broom factory, a printing press, a dairy, 2,400 acres of farmland, half of it irrigated, a meat shop, and a smokehouse. A 1909 news clipping stated that the year's receipts from the dairy were $1,500, and the broom department, drawing its material from 40 acres of broom corn, had a capacity of 2,000 brooms annually. In spite of these efforts to be self-supporting, financing the school was a continual problem. Paddock spent 6 to 8 months of every year soliciting donations from benefactors in the East. He called for support from a list of people that read like a who's who of his day. George Eastman of Eastman Kodak Company was a donor. Conservationist Gifford Pinchot was a friend and a sponsor. Teddy Roosevelt gave the school his boisterous endorsement. Mrs. Russell Sage, the most prolific philanthropist of her time, funded a building. The Kimball Piano Company donated 11 pianos to the conservatory. Andrew Carnegie contributed heavily to Paddock and Jenkins reservoirs, convinced it would help turn the dry land into productive fields and make the school self-supporting. And Paddock didn't just look for money. He'd take anything that would help sustain the Institute. A boxcar of shredded wheat once arrived from Battle Creek, Michigan, and along with it, the chore of keeping the mice out of it. He also received donations of cement from the Portland Cement Company, and thus began the construction of the stately buildings that survive today. The poured concrete was scored and painted to resemble cut stone and red mortar. The architecture was highly unusual for its time. The first concrete structure, Beardsley Hall, was completed in 1907. The basement housed the kitchen and dining room. On the first floor were the chapel and faculty offices. The second and third stories boarded more than 40 girls. The rooms were heated by steam, and hot and cold running water was provided for bathrooms located on all floors. That same year, the Broadhead Shop building was built directly behind Beardsley Hall. The first floor had a blacksmith and machine shop. The second floor housed carpentry and woodworking shops. Over the next 20 years, 4 more concrete buildings were constructed. Students comprised the labor force for all these buildings. The boys' dorm, Slocum Hall, was completed in 1909 as a memorial to Jane Slocum and her cousin, Mrs. Russell Slocum Sage, who donated $10,000 for its construction. The basement had a swimming pool, and the attic had a gymnasium. At one end of the building were quarters for the boys' principal and faculty members. On January 4th, 1910, one of the most substantial early structures, Tripp Hall, the science building, was destroyed by fire. A small stove in the attic had burned through the floor and fell to the boys' dorm on the second floor. Being in the middle of a record cold winter, there was no water to fight the fire with. That same year, Paddock offered a contractor $100 to haul a huge granite boulder 7.5 miles to the school to serve as a dedication monument. 2 men worked 8 days and only moved it 1.5 miles. 3 years later, during the winter, and with the help of 8 horses, they tried again. 2 homemade bobs were inserted under the 20-ton rock, which was then pulled to the school. The contractor was paid an additional $100 for completing the difficult job. The actual dedication did not take place until 1920. Today, what was meant to be the centerpiece of the campus is marooned in a farm field next to the Weiser High School track and football field. In 1912, an anonymous $5,000 gift was given with the stipulation that it be used exclusively for Paddock's home. Paddock wrote back requesting the money to be used for another dormitory. His request was denied. It is most likely that he enlisted students to help build his home graycoat and put the savings in the general fund. In 1913, there was a fire in Beardsley Hall. The concrete structure withstood the flames and it was rebuilt within a year. You can see evidence of the fire where the porch burnt in this photo. In 1914, construction continued with the dairy barns and the tower, a pump house with a 44,800-gallon reservoir which provided water to the kitchen, dorms, and shop buildings. Although discipline was strict and Bible study and church attendance were mandatory, the Institute was not a reform school. To make this distinction clear, in 1915, the Idaho Industrial Institute was renamed the Intermountain Institute. One of the most beloved faculty members was Charles Camp, who remained at the school from 1916 to 1933. He taught shop work, mechanical drawing, and art history. He had attended Connecticut State Normal School and the D.L. Moody School at Mount Hermon, Massachusetts. His education also included 3 years at the Art Institute in Chicago, where he specialized in sculpture before going to France on a 7-month study program. In 1916, the Institute became the owner of a registered herd of Holstein Friesian cows and a young bull. The dairy herd, under the direction of Evan Evans, was to become the most successful industry of the school. It gained a reputation for being one of the finest in the Northwest, bringing many honors to the Institute. In 1922, one top cow produced enough milk to provide 29 people with 1 quart of milk each day for a year. It was humorously recounted that Carnegie was sweetened up by gifts of honey from the Institute Ranch. In 1918, the Andrew Carnegie Library was completed. He endowed the building, as well as 5,000 books. It is believed to be the only Carnegie Library ever endowed to a secondary school. Its basement was used as a music conservatory. Started in 1920, it took 3 years to build Hooker Hall, the finest building on the campus. The money, $100,000, came from 2 sisters, Mrs. Fanny Hooker Forbes of Westboro, Massachusetts, and Mrs. Mary Hooker Dole of Oak Park, Illinois, and was donated in memory of their father. 5 stories high and built in the center of the campus, Hooker Hall contains a 300-seat auditorium, basement workshops, offices on the main floor, and 35 classrooms. The clock tower was added later to distinguish it from the other buildings. The school was flourishing. Sports were a mainstay. Baseball was popular as well as track. Basketball and swimming were enjoyed by both boys and girls, and in 1921, the first Washington County track meet was held on campus. This was used as a recruiting event, and track winners received $50 scholarships. Growth of the school was astonishing. By 1923, it had the largest payroll in Washington County. Miss Slocum had lived to see this day, but now her day was done. On August 10, 1924, at the age of 81, Miss Slocum died at Friends Lodge. She had been a driving force at the Institute until poor eyesight had curtailed her involvement some years earlier. Work on what was said to be the finest gymnasium in Idaho began in 1928 and was finished in May of 1930. It was financed by the daughter of Northern Pacific Railroad builder Frederick Billings. The Billings Gym includes locker rooms, shower facilities, a 22 by 60 foot swimming pool, and a splendid gym floor with a balcony for viewing. Paddock, now in his 80s, fell from scaffolding during its construction and broke his leg. That didn't stop him from delivering the baccalaureate address a few days later, reportedly one of his most impressive sermons. Scholarships were also awarded to the winners of oratorical contests. The Intermountain Institute was one of the few Idaho high schools to join the State Debating League in 1920. A typical day saw the girls out of bed at 5 a.m., ready to cook, can, do laundry, or bake. At 6:30 a.m., they served a hearty breakfast, usually consisting of canned fruit, oatmeal, hash, fried potatoes, baked apples, and hot biscuits or cornbread, with plenty of coffee. Referred to as milkmaids, young boys rose before dawn to milk the cows and fill bottles for the town delivery. Most of the students did not mind the hard work, for there were also plenty of parties and picnics and fun, along with the daily chapel and hard discipline. An hour of recreation was scheduled after dinner on school days, then study by the coal oil lamp until 9:30, and lights out at 10 p.m. Even in work routine, there was often a touch of Bible. The girls who scrubbed clothes on washboards and pressed them with flat irons used, "I have learned in whatsoever state I am to be content." A slightly altered platitude appeared on the sewing room wall. "As ye sow, so shall ye rip." The curriculum included a regular college preparatory course with math, science, history, classical literature, Spanish, Latin, music, and art. Everyone took a class in the Bible. All girls were required to take a course in domestic science, and all boys were required to take a course in manual training. Many other vocational courses were offered. The goal was to educate the whole person. Dramatics also played an important part in school life. There were several annual dramatics fundraisers at the school, some of which were presented to the public in the downtown Wheaton Theater. The students in the Institute family generally held a great deal of love and respect for Paddock. Because he worked constantly on their behalf, they did what they could to help him and the school. On one occasion, they accepted a proposition made to them by A.A. Hyde of Wichita, Kansas, manufacturer of mentholatum. He agreed to pay $10 to every student who could memorize the Sermon on the Mount. 84 students learned it, earning $840 the students voted to put towards fixing up the gym. By the 1930s, the school's excellent faculty and curriculum were attracting boys and girls to the Institute in preference to the public schools. Emphasis at the Institute was strong on character building. Reverend Paddock believed that education and religion should progress together. He once remarked,
If you can't build good character, don't educate them because there will be a menace to the world.
The Great Depression that shocked the nation in 1929 finally overwhelmed the Institute in 1933. Benefactors, crippled by the grim economic conditions, were no longer able to make contributions, and the market for Institute farm crops and products disappeared. This note from Paddock to teacher Mrs. Thompson in July 1933 reflects the financial crisis that closed the school.
Weiser, Idaho, July 24, 1933. My dear Mrs. Thompson, I am glad indeed to send your check for balance due your salary from the Institute. I believe this is the first time the Institute has failed to pay a teacher at the end of the school year. A more efficient beggar is needed. Please date and sign the enclosed receipt and return it to me. Prosperity and great happiness to you and yours, your friend and fellow laborer in the work of the world, E.A. Paddock.
In 1933, the trustees turned the school over to the Weiser School District, with the understanding that it would revert to the Intermountain Institute at a later date. The National Youth Administration used the site to train disadvantaged youth during the Depression. Just 2 months short of his 97th birthday, on January 20th, 1940, Paddock died. His dream of reopening the Institute was kept alive by active alumni, but 8 years later, that dream died. In 1948, after a prolonged court battle, a judge decided not to return the school to the trustees. The dairy herd, which had continued to operate, was now liquidated, and the proceeds were given to the College of Idaho and Whitman College. Weiser High School took over the old campus until a new high school was constructed for the district in 1967. In 1969, the Weiser School District sold the campus and a series of private owners ensued. In 1979, Hooker Hall was bought by the Washington County Historical Society. After major renovation, Hooker was grandly reopened in 1980 as the Intermountain Cultural Center and Museum. On June 4, 1994, a devastating fire struck Hooker Hall. Much was lost, and the entire building sustained smoke and water damage. As soon as the fire was out, volunteers of all ages from all over the area worked day and night to try to save the treasures. That fall, the 124th Civil Engineering Squadron of the Idaho Air National Guard worked on the structural rebuilding of Hooker Hall. Much work remains to be done to refurbish the building and artifacts, and volunteers continue to fuel the effort. In October 1995, the Board of Directors voted to change the name to Snake River Heritage Center with the following mission statement: to bring together and preserve the culture and heritage of all the peoples of the Snake River country for the education of this and future generations. The Intermountain Institute has an alumni room there. During its 34-year existence, the school educated over 2,000 students. The alumni still attest to its great influence in their lives.
The Intermountain Institute, to me, was a thing that was very necessary at the time it was here, because many places around the country, public high schools wasn't available. And that's why it flourished there for so many years, until it began to get, like our class was 56 of us as freshmen, there was 21 of us graduated. That's how it went down in the 4 years I was here. And when we were here, we never did pay only about half of the cost to run the place ourselves. And he had to go and beg the rest of it. And being the Depression on that made it real hard, because it hurt the rich people too.
I worked about half of it. The first year I didn't work. Most of the kids did. So the second, my sophomore and junior year, I was one of the dishwashers. And my senior year, I was one of the 3 girls that got breakfast for the group.
I did janitorial work in the buildings to pay my way. I'd go out in the summertime and make what I could, and come there in the fall and pay what I had and work the rest of it out.
Part of my tuition was paid, very little of it though, but I worked most of the time for it.
The first year, my aunt and uncle put the down payment for the first half, and most of the rest of it I worked out. I worked in the summer, and I came here 2 or 3 weeks before school started and worked to pay for it.
Well, my first job was setting up tables in the dining room, and it was a simple job, of course, but we had to make sure that the tables were set correctly, and we had very definite rules for doing things. There were 8 people at each table, with a faculty member at the head of each table. And then after setting tables for a year, I was cleaning hallways for 2 years as a janitor.
Oh, I even milked cows over at the dairy, and most of the time I worked around here for Mr. Kemp, doing whatever he wanted done around here.
They had a dairy, they raised hogs, and of course we had all our milk and butter. A lot of the kids worked in the dairy, and you could work there and earn your way.
If I remember right, we paid about $250, and it cost about that much more that they had to gather somewhere else. Somewhere's in that, because that don't sound like much money now, but it was then. It was a lot of money then.
Reverend Paddock was very religious man. He taught us religion. We had our Bible classes as well as our other studies. The rules were very strict. No drinking, no smoking. If they were caught drinking or smoking, they were kicked out. And if they slipped off the campus without permission, they were kicked out of school. But he was a very honest, wonderful person, I thought.
He was a great guy, and he used to get us boys together and talk to us about things that we'd ought to know and how to take care of ourselves and what to do and how to treat the girls.
He was a wonderful man. He'd been in the Civil War, of course. He was just old enough to be in that for a short time, but he worked very hard to get that school started. They started out with a tar paper shack to begin with.
Dr. Paddock, of course, came and lectured to us quite often, and always encouraging things and inspired us to be good students and so forth.
He was pretty stern, but he was nice about it. He had a way with him. He was nice about it.
They had awful good teachers, dedicated teachers, just real good.
I adored my teachers. They were all good teachers. And my favorite teacher, I think, was Mabel Schweigert, who was a home ec teacher and taught me to sew and cook and things. Another of my teachers that I especially liked was Charlotte Allen, who was the music teacher. I took music lessons under her, also voice lessons.
My favorite teacher was Mr. Camp, and I took all 4 years under him, and he was a super teacher. Fact is, I didn't have money to buy my pictures, and he bought them for me, and then I worked it out. But anyway, they were all good teachers. Miss Morgan, an English teacher. One time I kind of fell a little bit and wasn't eligible to play ball, and the other teachers wouldn't help me. She says, "Come in," says, "I'll help you." So I got my grades up from then on and kept playing ball.
And Miss Anderson, who was our Latin teacher, had us involved in a Latin banquet, Roman banquet. We were dressed in togas and sandals and reclined on sheets on the floor to be served a 7-course meal. And we had a burlesque show. We had all kinds of fun things involving Latin. We had a Greek council where each one of us represented a Greek god or goddess, and we learned what each represented in life. I think I was Diane of the chase or something like that, because I'm an outdoor person, and had hunted with my father and so forth. Anyway.
Oh, I don't know. There was a Mrs. Comstock. I didn't have any money. I was an orphan. So she even got me some suits, 2 or 3 suits to wear, because I didn't have any money. I'd go work in the summertime, but it'd take all my money to pay to go to school for what I could, and then I'd earn the rest of the way, of course. But you just didn't have money to buy the things. So she knew and I was an orphan. Besides, I didn't have any mother or father. So she would see to it that I got my suit now and then. She got me 2 or 3 suits. God bless her soul, she was a wonderful woman. She was an English teacher, if I remember correctly.
And Mrs. Allen, of course, was our music teacher. And I wish I'd have taken piano. It only cost $10 a year. My money, but the folks didn't think I was musical. But anyway, I did take voice with her.
We had a very interesting history class. Fred Robinson was our history teacher. And the year I was a junior, we took ancient history. Each Monday we met as a class. He gave us each a series of questions to be answered, sent us to the library to answer these questions, which we were required to attend each day at the library that hour. And then we met again the following Monday and discussed everything we learned, which I think was a great way of learning about history.
So the classes were anywhere from 7 to 8 to 15, maybe a few more in some classes. So the teacher or instructor could give you a lot of attention.
And I had to sing down by the old mill stream on the stage in front of the pupils. I'd been singing it for a long time in her studio over here in the library, but that was different. But she was right there playing it and ready to coach me if I needed it. I made it through.
One thing we required each class, history, Latin, math, whatever, had to compose a skit to perform in our meetings each week, which was a lot of fun. We had trials, we had burlesque shows, Latin shows, we had all kinds of fun things like that.
The unique thing about the schools were the discipline. I think the discipline that kept the kids organized. They knew there was things they couldn't do. You couldn't sneak out and date a girl because there's no way for her to get out of the dormitory anyway. Unfortunately, once in a while that would happen. But if they found out, they were gone. I only knew, in my 4 years there, I only knew of 2 kids that were kicked out because of that. And but they wouldn't tolerate that at all. You couldn't go walking. You could walk around in the daytime as long as you stayed out where you was visible at all times. They were real strict on that. I don't believe there wanted any pregnancy coming out of the school. And so there was none, never was. In the many years, 30-some years, there was never a pregnancy there.
We had to have permission to leave the campus. Most of us went to Weiser on Saturday afternoons. A lot of us would attend the movies, which we could go to for 10 cents. But we had to be back on campus by 6 o'clock. If we missed getting back, we would be campused for a couple of weeks, which was something we didn't like.
We weren't allowed to go downtown just to play around. We had an escort, and we had to choose what we enjoyed. But going to church was something that we had a choice of 5 different churches each weekend, each Sunday, and we could choose to go wherever we wanted to. And I attended every church in Weiser, learning more about religion. But we were taught religion 9 weeks out of each year. And I'm kind of not one church person.
We were required to keep our rooms clean. We had to have our beds made before we went to chapel. They always had chapel in the morning, which was a gathering of all of the students. We'd have during the times that we would have ball games and things, we'd have our yells and things like that. We had entertainment. The bands would play and the glee clubs would sing, and we always had prayer, and we always had a bit of religious teaching. And we were required, like I said, to make our beds before we left. If we didn't have our beds made, we were called out of chapel to go home and make our beds, which was very embarrassing. So everybody had their beds made.
I worked in the kitchen, and I had to set the table up and bring the food to the kids that waited on the tables. There was 130 kids there. So there was probably 10 waiters. And so my job was to see to it that their table was set and ready to go a little earlier than some of the rest, because those kids had to either eat and get things ready so they could be out and start feeding the kids that came in to eat at around 8 o'clock or a little before. And then the classes started, as I remembered, at 9 o'clock. And they'd go for 3 hours, and then they'd come, the same thing would happen again at noon. Now they had 2 lady cooks there that was supervisor, but the kids did most of the work as far as peeling the potatoes and getting the carrots ready and all that kind of stuff. And they had great big boilers and big stoves, and boy, they could cook a lot of food in a hurry. Then after you had lunch, you'd go back to classes, and you'd go to classes till evening, till probably 4 o'clock or thereabouts. Then the class would be over. Not that the work would stop, because you still had to take nourishment, and the kids that was working there had to do that. Other kids that might be out working in the yards, doing yard work, or janitorial work. I did both, janitorial and then worked in the kitchen. And you had decorative work to do on the yards, planting plants and flowers and stuff in the spring, the lawns to mow and things like that to do. The athletic field had to be taken care of. You'd go to study hall, or you stay in your room. Now you could be out playing around too if your grades were up. If your grades weren't up, then you had to go to the study hall, and that's why they supervised you and seen to it you bring your grades up to par. I got in there a time or two.
They'd say there was absolutely no discrimination. It was proven at our Saturday night parties, no one was left out. Everyone had to attend a party, unless they were so sick they couldn't get out of bed. And no one was left sitting on the bench. They had ways of mixing the students so that everyone participated in everything we did. So that was a wonderful element of the school. We had the glee clubs. We had band. I played the trombone in the band. And we'd had 15 hikes. We hiked up to Mans Creek, and the last hike was at Mans Creek, where we went and stayed all night. We hiked to Olds Ferry. We hiked to Indian Head. We hiked up to Jenkins Creeks. We hiked over to Payette.
Well, I was involved primarily, I guess, with athletics. The first year I went there, I'd crushed my finger and with some rocks. I was helping my brother-in-law build a house, and he wanted some big rocks for the foundation. And one of those rocks mashed my finger on my right hand, and so I couldn't play football that first year I was there. And then after that, why, I never missed. I won 10 letters there at the school, and I enjoyed it. We played football, basketball, and baseball, and we won most every year. We'd win more than we lost, and had quite a reputation. In fact, the high school coach wouldn't let us play his team football because he was afraid we'd beat him.
Weiser was our rivals in our sports. If we could just beat Weiser, we were always happy. The year I was a freshman, I was not allowed to enter sports and basketball because my mother had died of tuberculosis, and we'd had tuberculosis tests when I first came, and I showed a positive reaction, and they thought I shouldn't be too active, so I didn't get to play basketball. But in later years, I played basketball, I played tennis, on the tennis team, and on the swimming team, and we had a tumbling class, which I took part in. So
I was quite involved. But they had a wonderful, wonderful athletic department. The first year, the gymnasium had been built in 1933 and 4, or 32 and 33. And our class was the first one to be able to use it. And had a beautiful big swimming pool in the basement of the gymnasium, so that was a thrill. I don't think there were very many gymnasiums with swimming pools in high schools in those days.
I love sports, especially football.
Were you good at it?
I was. I was the right end. I was always the pass receiver. The other guy, sometimes they'd trade us around because he'd back up and I wouldn't. They had to run over me. But it worked better to stay on my right end, because the right ends, when they went around, then I would get in there and I'd get out there real fast and I'd catch that guy from behind. They'd say, "Where'd he come from?"
Well, the Intermountain Institute and the Alumni Association picnics have been a bright light in my life, all my life. The picnics were started soon after the school closed in 1933. They originated in California, where a group of students got together. And for years they were held at the Rose Garden in Boise. And there was a rumor that these buildings were to be destroyed, so we moved our picnics to the Weiser Institute campgrounds. And we've had them there for years and years and years. I have been the corresponding secretary for the Alumni Association for 30 years, so I keep in close contact with all of them. I started out with 450 on the mailing list, and now it's down to about 100. Oh, I loved every one of them and still do. There's only 5 of us left of the class of 1930.
When the school closed, I think it was like closing a door in my face, and I had so in hopes to return here, to graduate from here. It was, I think, one of the most disappointing things in my life.
The camaraderie was just fantastic. Those people, even today, what few's left, are still hanging together.
Best I can say for being at the Institute is probably one of the greatest 4 years of my life, because of what it taught me here, not only scholastic things, but everything.
I don't think that there could have been a better school in the whole USA for young people to attend. I just wish there were more schools like it nowadays.